This story recapped. Today, I'm going to explain an action, adventure, and sci-fi film called Fantastic Four. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. At the Von Doom Industries, Dr. Reed Richards gives his presentation, theorizing that exposure to high-energy cosmic storms trigger the evolution of life. A similar event will happen in 6 weeks, so he suggests studying the cosmic storm to learn more about the human genome, to pave the way for further medical studies. Company CEO and Reed's former classmate Victor Von Doom, however, thinks Reed's head is always in the clouds, which isn't practical, showing the magazine that reported his bankruptcy as proof. Reed continues that Victor's space station is perfectly designed to protect them from the cosmic storms. Victor pokes questions about Reed's credibility, so his best friend Ben Grimm's urges Reed to leave. Reed's ex-girlfriend and Victor's director of genetic research, Sue Storm, arrives and greets them. Victor finally offers to back Reed's research in exchange for 75% of the applications and patents. Out of options, Reed reluctantly accepts. At the elevator, Sue discusses that she'll be organizing their trip to space. Reed insists on having Ben as their pilot, but she reveals that her brother Johnny is already the company's pilot. On the day of the launch, Ben ridicules their spacesuits, but Sue explains that Victor designed them to adapt to each individual's needs. Eventually, they reach Victor's space station. While Ben heads outside the station to load their samples, Victor invites Sue to talk privately. He opens the station's shield to give her a marvelous view of space. Suddenly, Reed's computer announces that the solar storm is approaching sooner than expected. Victor proposes to Sue, but Reed interrupts them, warning them that the storm is about to hit. Reed calls Ben to return, but the cosmic storm is already too close. Johnny advises him to jump, so Ben floats back to the station. Meanwhile, Victor prepares to close the shields in the control room, but Sue insists that he can leave the rest outside. Victor activates the shields anyway, so Sue leaves to gather the others. Ben closes in, but he gets hit by a blast. The energy reaches the space station, sending waves at all of them. Days later, Ben wakes up back on Earth in a quarantine facility with Johnny looking after him. He mournfully tells Ben that the doctors did what they could to save his appearance. Ben grabs a mirror and worriedly looks at his reflection, only to find that he looks normal. He throws the mirror at Johnny for tricking him. Meanwhile, Victor's investors threaten to pull their funding if he doesn't turn around their loss due to Reed's project. At the hospital, Johnny prepares to leave, but the nurse reminds him that he can't leave until they finish the tests. She checks his temperature and sees that it's impossibly high. She notes that he's hot, which she mistakes as a compliment. Johnny invites her out before leaving. Outside, Ben and Reed happily reunite. Reed is still confused about how he miscalculated the cosmic storm's arrival, but Ben assures him that freaks of nature can't be predicted. He then encourages Reed to get back together with Sue, but Reed accepts that she's with Victor already. Later, Johnny takes the nurse snowboarding. Johnny does some tricks, not realizing that he's on fire. When the nurse points it out, Johnny panics and falls from a cliff. Suddenly, he bursts into flames and flies into a mound of snow. That evening, Ben tricks Reed and Sue to have dinner together. Meanwhile, Victor notices a scar on his forehead. When he reaches for his silverware, the metals react to him before he touches them. Ben, Reed, and Sue enjoy their meal until Ben starts feeling odd. He excuses himself, leaving the two alone. The air becomes awkward, but Sue notices the time and excuses herself since she has another dinner date with Victor. When Reed notes that she and Victor share a passion for science, Sue criticizes that science is all he thinks about. She's hurt that he's just happy that she's in another relationship, adding that she hopes to feel wanted. When Reed looks up at her, Sue's body has become transparent. Sue notices and knocks over the champagne bottle, which Reed grabs, extending his arm further than possible. Suddenly, Sue becomes visible again, and Johnny arrives, excited to share what happened to him. They check on Ben, who's under the covers and grunting in pain. With the door locked, Reed flattens his hand to reach under the door. Stretching his hand, he unlocks the door and opens it. By the time they enter the room, however, Ben is gone. Ben calls his fiancée Debbie and tells her to meet him outside, so she goes out. Ben, however, hides in the shadows and reminds her that they promised they'll be together no matter what. When she confirms, Ben steps into the light and reveals his massive rock-like form. Debbie runs away in fear. In the morning, Ben laments over his situation on a bridge. Suddenly, a man steps in about to jump. Ben stops him, and the man starts walking away in fear. He falls straight into traffic, so Ben hops down and stops the truck before it hits him. The event causes multiple collisions, catching Reed, Sue, and Johnny's attention. While Ben tries to help the truck driver stuck in the vehicle, the trio attempts to get through the crowd. Reed suggests Sue turn invisible, so she turns and removes her clothes, but she becomes visible again. After Ben pulls the driver out of the truck, police officers hold him at gunpoint. A spark from a generator forces an officer to shoot, so Ben runs. Suddenly, an oxygen tank explodes, and Johnny shields a kid from the flames, while Sue instinctively creates a force field to contain the flames. An incoming fire truck swerves and hangs halfway off the bridge, so Ben holds the vehicle, preventing it from falling. Seeing a fireman fall, Reed reaches down and catches him. Ben finally pulls the truck back into the bridge, yet officers still hold him at gunpoint. However, the civilians and firefighters applaud him, diffusing the situation. Ben spots Debbie from the crowd, but despite the applause, she removes her engagement ring and leaves. Their heroic acts get publicized, with the media calling them the Fantastic Four. Johnny is excited to talk to the press, but the others are hesitant. When asked who the leader is, Reed is forced to step up. He explains how they were exposed to radioactive energy, but the press is only interested in their abilities. The group heads to the Baxter building to stay in Reed's apartment, which is mostly his laboratory. Later, Victor arrives and offers Sue lodgings at his condo, but she insists on staying with her brother. Reed finds them, so Victor steps out. Reed catches up to him to apologize for failing the project. Victor scolds him for ruining their lives. When Victor gets angry, the lights flicker. Hearing the commotion, Ben steps in, so Victor leaves. Inside the elevator, Victor punches the wall in anger, then notices the metallic tissue under his skin. For the next few days, Sue and Reed study their powers, learning that Ben's internal organs also turn to stone, and Sue's emotion is connected to her invisibility. On a test run, Johnny pushes the limits of his flames and begins to lift in the air, but Reed extinguishes him. They find his containment unit in ruins, and Sue warns him that if he'd gone any hotter, he'd turn supernova and destroy the planet. While testing her invisibility, Sue releases a force field that knocks Reed down. When she jokes that it might have been due to latent hostility, Reed mentions that she broke up with him. Sue argues that she left because he wasn't ready to move in with her. Reed stresses that there were too many variables to consider, but Sue insists that he was overthinking. Victor gets himself checked and learns that his body structure is changing into an organic metallic alloy, similar to his space station's shields. The doctor considers reporting it to the CDC, but Victor insists that his condition remains confidential. When the doctor argues, he holds him by the throat and throws him into his X-ray screen. Soon, Reed studies the suits they wore in space and learns that since they were also exposed to the radiation, the suits can also transform like them. One day, Sue spots her face on magazine covers from a newsstand. People recognize her and start crowding around her, so she runs and turns invisible to escape. Sue warns the others that they can't be in public anymore. Reed also worries that their powers are evolving and shares that he's working on a machine that will reverse their mutation, though it's risky. Over the next few days, Johnny pranks Ben while Reed and Sue get into awkward encounters. Meanwhile, Victor's condition worsens, and his company is in danger of being taken over. Suddenly, Victor realizes that electricity reacts to his body, giving him an idea. At night, one of his investors goes to his car in the parking lot. When the lights start to flicker, Victor attacks him with a bolt of electricity that burns a hole in his torso. While Reed starts building his machine, Johnny watches an auto Daredevil show and decides to sneak out. Johnny arrives at the show, where the host introduces him as a special guest. Johnny wows the crowd, but the host dares him to show them something new. Johnny drives the motorcycle up a ramp and does a flip, but loses the motorcycle mid-air. Johnny erupts in flames to boost himself forward. Still, he miscalculates and crashes. The audience cheers for him as he removes his burnt-up suit, revealing his Fantastic Four costume. The others see Johnny's interview from the TV, where he gives himself and the others nicknames, namely the Human Torch, the Invisible Girl, Mr. Fantastic, and The Thing. The nickname pisses Ben off. The others confront Johnny, but Ben crushes Johnny's car and throws it in front of him. Sue and Reed try to defuse the situation, so Ben pulls back. Still, Johnny throws fireballs at him, pissing him off. Reed steps between them when Ben punches Johnny, but Johnny still gets thrown back. Sue blocks them from fighting, and Ben walks away. On the streets, Sue tries to calm Ben down, but he directs his anger at the gawking civilians. She asks him to wait for Reed to fix them, but Ben complains that it's easy for them to be patient. Ben adds that he'd prefer to be invisible than to look like what he is now. That evening, Ben heads to a bar, but falls when he sits on a stool. The bartender tells the snickering patrons to show Ben some respect, then proceeds to get his drink. A blind woman named Alicia offers to pay for Ben's drink. He notes that she wouldn't be nice to him if she could see him, but Alicia walks over and studies his face with her touch. She advises that being different is not bad if he doesn't let it. Later, Victor heads home and watches Reed from the surveillance cameras he set up in his apartment. He complains that Reed took everything from him, so he plots to take them back. While he's having coffee at a diner, Victor joins Ben at his booth. Meanwhile, Sue finds Reed asleep on his desk. She wakes him and asks about the progress, but Reed reveals that he's run out of options, other than to test the machine on himself. Sue objects to this and urges him to take a break. She takes him to the observatory, reminiscing about the time when they were dating. Reed finally admits that Sue was right about their breakup, and the two rekindle their romance. Back at the diner, Victor sympathizes with Ben and implies that since Ben is Reed's best friend, he shouldn't waste his time with Sue and focus on fixing him. Later, Ben finds Sue and Reed coming home from their date. Ben scolds Reed for getting distracted, but Reed insists that he's working hard to ensure that the machine is safe. Ben starts getting aggressive and shoves him. Reed uses his stretched limbs to restrain Ben, but Ben throws him off. Reed's legs are still wrapped around Ben, so Reed snaps back to him and restrains him again. After Ben calms, he tells Reed that he won't be watching his back anymore. On his way out of the building, Johnny eagerly shows Ben a toy, but Ben smashes it on the wall before leaving. When Sue arrives, Johnny tells her that he's tired of them and wants to be out in the real world. Sue scolds him, reminding him that his fans don't care about him. Still, Johnny walks out. Desperate due to his altercation with Ben, Reed activates the machine and walks in. Sue arrives just as Reed steps out of the machine. She's happy that he seems okay, but his body starts drooping. Reed deduces that he needs more power to control the storm, and Victor hears this from his surveillance monitor. While Sue and Reed are in the hospital, Victor invites Ben into Reed's laboratory. He reveals that the machine is ready, but Reed doesn't have enough power, which Victor can provide. Ben steps inside the machine while Victor activates it. When the power levels decrease, Victor opens the containment unit and uses his powers to unleash more energy into it, while exposing himself to more radiation. Soon, Ben steps out in his normal body. He laughs in delight, but is stunned to see that Victor's face has become more metallic. Ben suggests that Victor use the machine too, but realizes that Victor planned to make him weaker. After Victor knocks out Ben, Reed arrives and realizes what he'd done. Victor strikes him with lightning, and the heat causes Reed's rubberized body to droop. Reed ends up falling off the building. Victor then takes Reed to his office and dons a metal mask to cover his scarred face. Meanwhile, Sue and Johnny help Ben up, who recounts what happened. At his office, Victor has injected Reed with the cooling chemical, causing his rubberized body to be brittle. He then fires a heat-seeking missile at the Baxter building. Recognizing the missile, Johnny jumps off the building, leading it away from Sue and Ben. He then blazes across the city with the missile on his tail. Sue then leaves to help Reed, but tells Ben to stay since it's dangerous for him to fight now that he's back to normal. Regretting his decision, Ben looks to the machine. Johnny zooms up in the sky, then throws a fireball. He turns off his flames, hoping that the missile will chase after it instead. However, the missile returns, so he blazes towards the New York Bay and lights up a garbage barge for the missile to hit. While invisible, Sue turns off the cooling unit on Reed and releases him. Still, Victor sees her. Sue offers to turn him back. Victor contends that fate gave them the powers. Sue releases a force field against Victor, and he shoots her with a lightning bolt. Sue then turns invisible and attacks him again, but this gives him her position, and he holds her by the throat. After Victor throws Sue down, Ben crashes through the wall, back as the Thing, and punches him. Victor is knocked against the opposite wall, causing the wall art to collapse onto him. While releasing Reed, the lights go out. Victor suddenly tackles Ben, and they crash into a pool in the adjacent building. The floor collapses, sending them to the lower floor and out the window. The two land on a sanitation truck, and Ben is sent flying by Victor's energy blast. The police open fire at Victor, and Ben hits him with a car. Still, Victor survives and hits Ben with a post. Before he makes a finishing blow, Reed, Sue, and Johnny arrive. Victor collects energy from the city, then directs it to Johnny and Ben. Sue shields herself from the blast while Reed captures Victor. Reed then orders Johnny to go supernova, and he hesitantly obliges. Once Reed releases Victor, Johnny creates a firestorm around him while Sue contains the heat. Soon, Johnny crashes on the ground and Sue releases her force field. Victor is still alive, but Ben breaks a fire hydrant and directs the water onto Victor, rapidly cooling his metallic body until it hardens, rendering him immobile. The crowd applauds as the team regroups after defeating the villain. The Fantastic Four hosts a party one night, mingling with their friends and fans. Ben has accepted his new form. Encouraged by his new girlfriend, Alicia, Reed pulls Sue away from the party and proposes to her. Filled with emotions, Sue becomes invisible as she accepts the ring. While watching them, Ben asks Johnny not to make fun of his appearance anymore. Still, Johnny shouts to the crowd how huge Ben is, and when Ben chases after him, Johnny bursts into flames and flies away. Meanwhile, Victor's metallic form is readied for shipping. His former assistant sees the Dockmaster's manifest glitching momentarily, hinting that Victor is still alive.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.